Hello, and welcome to episode 192 of the Rush Roundtable, where we discuss Cut to the Chase off of October 1993's Counterparts album. I was thinking of the date for a second, October 19, 1993. So we have a pretty consistent panel lately. We have Kira coming back. We have Paul here again. Chris makes his return after just a couple of weeks, and now we're joined by Omar, so we can actually bring in some new people. I promise I won't be hosting for the next song. We'll have a different host. It might not look too different, though. So,
it's me.
Yes, be that as it may. So this is us, and we're ready to talk about Cut to the Chase. I can certainly offer up for myself right off the bat that the second I heard this after purchasing the album, it just grabbed me. You know, Omar, before we began, was talking about the endpoint user, and right away it's just sort of, oh, I like this song. This has got a certain bit of excitement to it, and it's only been, however many years later that I was willing to really analyze it and look at why I liked it, which I might talk about, but I should probably let someone else speak. Anyone have anything they want to say about the beginning of this song and how it grabbed them?
I kind of like how
should have played it live.
But I also kind of like how how Getty got into the vocals like 4 seconds in. There was no long intro to the song. It's like, let's go. Boom. Grabs your attention. And that's what I liked about it, right? That was my initial thought of it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a slow build to it, before the guitars kick in, those chords kick in. It's just a great rocker, it's a little bit different for them. It's a little almost a standard kind of rocker song, with all the rushiness thrown in there as well, though. But it's I love that. I was lucky enough to have a sneak preview of this album a couple of weeks before it came out, and same thing. As soon as I heard it, boom, it was fantastic.
Yeah, I do like that build up that you talk about, Chris. And then when the guitars kicked in, I was blown away. Like, what is this? This is awesome. I immediately thought, oh, can't wait to see it live. This is going to be a live song. We'll talk about that later, but
yeah,
great. I mean, I was impressed right off the bat. And John Bonham / Led Zeppelin rears his head in this song, which I'll talk about later.
Nice.
Led Zeppelin influence back in the day comes back in this song. We'll talk about it.
All right. Well,
I like the departure from. Sorry.
No,
I just have one thing to say. I like the departure from Animate and Stick It Out, where the opening music builds up to a heavier riff instead of it just going in straight with the heavier riff. I think that it adds like a little bit of suspense to it, just makes it a little bit more exciting. Like sometimes, Stick It Out, Rush came out of the gate with that really heavy, strong riff and that bass line. But I like that they kind of build it up a little bit, just to kind of change it up from the last song. It keeps you guessing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And the fact that this is kind of one of the things I always liked about Alex Lifeson, where he had some distinct patterns on a clean tone guitar. Certainly other individuals, Andy Summers, Jamie West-Oram, a lot of individuals coming out of the 80s were renowned for basically having a nice clean chorus. Of course, you got compressors on there and whatnot for their parts. The songs at 110 beats per minute, E minor for the tonality. He's got the pattern is actually a pretty common pattern where it's built on even eighth notes, and then you have a 16th approaching beat 3, but then you syncopate beat 3. It's the exact same pattern, say, that Robert Fripp used on his main line in Heptaparopartian, which I know is what you were thinking. Not dissimilar to the intro solo in Rock You Like a Hurricane, but that's more solid 16ths with that beat 3 syncopation. And to me, that's one of the things that really sold the drive of the song. So clearly, since we have not been cutting to the chase on the lyrics, I should probably read the first verse, where Neil is having Getty say that it is the fire that lights itself, but it burns with a restless flame. The arrow on a moving target, the archer must be sure of his aim. It is the engine that drives itself, but it chooses the uphill climb, a bearing on magnetic north, growing farther away all the time. What are we thinking about that?
Oh.
Well, I think the whole song is about ambition. Ambition is, I mean, he says later, ambition is the fire. But that's what I always got out of it. That it's, you know, as we get in later into the lyrics about how ambition can be both driving but also dangerous, depending on what your ambition is. You know, now I'm blanking on the lyrics for the second verse, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah, I think there's like you know, how the lyrics, it's kind of like this certain resistance every step this person is taking in their ambition. I did also, you know, read a little bit about it's kind of like the dream that a person has, and they're trying to effect the dream, and along the way there's, you know, resistance, because not, you know, there's not a person who has, you know, expressed what their dream is and everybody agrees, oh, that's a great idea, everybody says it's a great idea. That never happens. So I think it's this the start of this person saying the things, you know, from within, the fire lights itself, you know, and then it burns with a restless flame. Now, moving target, the archer must be sure of his aim, or everything's going to go down. So he wants to do whatever it is he's dreaming about, but there, you know, there's going to be some obstacles along the way.
Yes.
I like how Rush again references fire. I don't know why these first three songs I keep seeing a lot of references to Hold Your Fire, Marathon. I also think this song relates to Middletown Dreams, Turn the Page, Vital Signs.
Mission.
Just like mission.
Circumstances.
Yeah, there's all these
prime mover.
so many.
Yep.
Yeah, so many of these
catalog.
connections that are made.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I know I mentioned this in Stick It Out, but it's just becoming more and more clear to me that realized something about Rush recently. Rush is very repetitive in their themes, but they are not redundant. Because redundancy is when it's boring, when it's formulaic, when it's
the exact same thing every time.
Mediocre. You know? Exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's like repetitive and it's theming, but it's not redundant. And I like that Neil writes about these same themes and topics over and over again. But it never gets tiring or old because of the way he writes, the way the music is. It's all different, which I think is really unique because a lot of bands do the same thing just over and over again, and it's redundant, becomes stale. But with Rush has always been bold, always been creative, always been experimental. It
the
just
angles
makes
are always
even
fresh.
more unique.
I got this vision of Neil, like Kevin McDonald and the Kids in the Hall, sitting there, you know, in front of the typewriter, saying, "What do you know? What do I know? What do I know?" It's just like, write what you know. It's like, well, this is what he knows. He knows trying to become a rock star, and that is the biggest. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll.
Yep.
Speaking of bands that sound the same every album. And also too, not that I'm bagging on AC/DC, you know, I mean, they certainly have their place, you know, but singular sound, you got to admit it. But one of the things with the guitar part too, during this verse, it's the intro, it's the short intro, it's the verse, it is a pattern that is repeating. He's not altering his guitar pattern, which he's done in many other songs. Certainly, you know, like say Show Don't Tell, for instance, there's a distinctive pattern that is fairly changeable. And this is a short one measure phrase that is repeating. As Kira is saying, the guitar is repeating in a way, and he's just changing positions of, you know, for the tonality from E to G to D. Anyway, once we kick
prime
in
movers like that too.
Yeah, various arpeggiated lines, not just from Rush, not just from other individuals. Well, other individuals.
Yeah, and just to get back to that intro too, it kind of sneaks up on you. It's this little, you know, just those octaves, ding, 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 and Geddy's got this little you know, that it's in the background, and then bang. You know, and then we wonderfully supported in the second verse by Neil.
We get into some heavy chords. But wait a second. if we do move forward in the lyrics, can't stop moving, which we probably shouldn't stop moving on these lyrics. So once again, he sings can't stop moving. Second time, Donna's law of repetition, can't stop. He leaves off the moving, just can't stop to kick into those power chords. Where we have our chorus of you may be right, it's all a waste of time. I guess it's just a chance I'm prepared to take, a danger I'm prepared to face, cut to the chase, just a danger I'm prepared to face, cut to the chase.
I made the silly decision to become an actor when I was younger. And I, all through high school, when I was telling people that's what I was going to do, every single adult, I just, well, it's a tough business. You got to find something to back yourself up. And I just kept saying, if I find something to fall back on, I'm just going to fall back. I can't. So I just got to go for it,
I like Neil's persistence to go against the norm.
Yeah.
AKA vital signs.
One reason I love this band so much was because he sang about that stuff. He wrote about that stuff.
And basically every adult you encountered said, hey, think about the average. What use have they for you?
Right. Exactly.
It reaches way back.
But obsession has to have action.
What I was going to say about this song, I'm sure I'm going to go to another song too. Right. So to me, almost always when Neil writes something, it's like he's writing about 2 or 3 things at the same time, or that 2 or 3 things are happening at the same time from different angles. It's like in this case, he's telling himself, this dreamer, right? This guy who wants to get, work on his ambition or whatever, you may be right, or it's a waste of time. It's like going back and forth with himself. And then at the end, he just tells him, I'll cut to the chase. Whenever we say cut to the chase to someone, we're like, what do you really want to say? Just spit it out, spit it out. But also it could be that someone else is telling him, cut to the chase. What is it that you want to do? So it could be himself or another person telling him, well, cut to the chase. What are you talking about? Tell me, stop with the word salad. Tell me what you want to do. Right. So I'm seeing it that way as well.
Well, that's why the album's called Counterparts, because every single song has some sort of duality and dual purpose. I guess so. Yep. Cut to the chase could really mean, in the context of the song, I think it has 2 meanings, but really it could mean more than that for each person. Just depends.
Now,
it's your own interpretation of it. That's why I like when Neil has lyrics that are still somewhat abstract but easy to read. I like when Neil has complicated lyrics, but sometimes it's good that I like when Rush has a little bit more of a simpler melody and simpler lyric. I like that they have balance. They do that, I think, incredibly well.
Well, who was that in the Beyond the Lighted Stage doc that was it Dave Taylor Hawkins that made one of them made the reference that you have they did such a good job of walking between complex music, complex lyrics, but they weren't over your head.
Yeah.
This wasn't
Billy Corrigan. It was the Smashing Pumpkins guy.
Yeah, at least a couple of them were saying different things to that effect, because the fact that I remember what Billy Corrigan said. But the idea of one of them saying, if you like Black Sabbath for the heaviness, but you like Yes for some complex this and that. The idea there that they have that intelligence, but they have that punch that's not so far reaching.
Right.
One of the things with the guitar part at this point, there's a little bit of a key change, but not a blatant one. And he's basically the power chords he's using. It's a nice little, not to get too theoretical here, but he's essentially like a G to A shift, a whole step. But then he moves up to the B, which from G would be a third, which is a nice jump that is. It's one of those jumps that the human brain says, at least those of us who grew up on Western music, and by Western, I mean Eurocentric music, not country and Western. I've had to differentiate that with my students, just making sure. So, but he has this consistent kind of little bit of a power chord movement that, as I say, is a whole step. Let's move it up, whole step here. Oh, we're going to jump back down by a fifth, half step. There's a certain suspense in the way that Alex Lifeson was structuring all these guitar parts, which I'm sure anyone watching this would agree. No one would, just choose to be a random contrarian on that, I'm sure. Now, if we
That's
were
a
to,
good point that you make, Alex, about the jumps that he makes during this part.
yes,
Like the chords are like, it's way up here, then he goes way down here, then he goes back up here. So it kind of keeps you like on an anticipatory state, like what's coming,
yeah.
where is he going with the next, next chord. Yeah.
Well, like one of the characteristics of thrash metal, I mean, early Metallica, you're talking about a lot of half step movement. You're talking about a lot of tritones, cutting the octave in half, which were meant to be suspenseful in a "are we going to get murdered" kind of way. But in this case, this is more suspenseful in a "hey, well, let's get out there and live a life and do our thing" type of situation. Well, that's just my take. It might not be a hot take, it might not be a great take, but it's just a take for the moment.
It's a cool take. Cool.
Thank you. Now, I suppose, do we want to get into the next verse, or do we have more to say about the chorus? All right, we'll go to the verse.
Let's go.
So what was he saying? It is the rocket that ignites itself and launches its way to the stars. Quite the imagery there. A driver on a busy freeway, a driver on a busy freeway racing the oblivious cars. That's a line that stuck with me on many drives. It's the motor of the Western world spinning off to every extreme, pure as a lover's desire, evil as a murderer's dream. Aside from my inability to read, apparently, it's also weird foreshadowing in what I just said in the chorus that I feel like brings us up to here. So, verse 2.
Yeah. Well, it's more of that. It's more of a continuation of what was happening in the first verse, and that was the line I couldn't think of, was "pure as a lover's desire, evil as a murderer's dream." That Hitler was ambitious. You know what I mean? there's different things that people do with whatever fire is inside of them. Sort of like the armor and sword analogy in on Snakes and Arrows.
That's a very dark juxtaposition.
Oh yeah.
But
that's like really sneaky too, because like it kind of just like surprises you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the funny thing about this too, and I've heard it said in regards to a lyric in Nobody's Hero, which I know Paul will address next week. Some people take issue with the phrasing of lyrics. And obviously, if you're a lyricist, you're writing a song and you need to say what you need to say. If you're the vocalist in an original band, how are we going to put this together? And, I think of bands I've been in where some of the lyrics were just junk, or the whoever was coming up with the vocal melody, I'm standing there thinking, ugh. And then I just think of a band I was in where, I'm just thinking, he's writing, everything he's writing is awesome, as far as the vocal melody and the rhythm of it. The line, it's the motor of the Western world, is what I'm taking the long way and not cutting to the chase to talk about. I love the way that Geddy sings that. It's the motor of the Western world. That is a mouthful of a line, which he delivers excellently. Why would he not? They put it on tape, and they're not going to put garbage on tape. And I just, that's something that just sticks out to me. The idea of, hey, let's listen to this song, let's listen to that second verse and how he sings it, and recognize that's Neil's line. Geddy had to deliver it. Geddy delivered it.
He took it up a little bit. It's great, great melody, and he was really in a sweet spot vocally during this period. I mean, like starting with, I've always loved his voice, but like really starting with Power Windows and going all the way through, he's like he just kept developing his voice more and more and more and more and more, and it's fantastic.
I've seen a few interviews where they, Geddy works a lot with Neil to say, okay, can I sing this? Does it make sense? Like they're always giving each other back and forth some feedback to say, no, this. I think it was Alex that mentioned in an interview. He said if Geddy doesn't feel it, he's not going to want to sing it. Yep. So he'll go back to Neil and say, it could be one line, it could be four, it could be a whole verse. But they work together to make it work. And, like you said, this second one just comes out fantastic.
Neil got Geddy to speak French in Circumstances, which is pretty brave.
Well, they did grow up in Toronto, right? So it's a second language.
Yeah.
Those of us in the States might butcher it and have
that's all right. Don't worry about it. It's all good.
Sorry.
Sorry. I was going to say something about these lyrics that were just read before the next chorus again. I think let's call him the protagonist in this song. I think he's past the point where he cares about what anybody says. Like he's in passion mode right now, because it's talking about the rocket that ignites itself, launches to the stars, driver on a freeway oblivious to the other cars, like they're going straight ahead. Then those two last lines, pure as a lover's desire, evil as a murderer's dream.
Yeah.
If we look in literature, those are probably the two most passionate states that a human can be in. If you're pure as a lover's desire, what's stronger than that? Or if you're at the point where you want to kill someone, that's pretty passionate too. I mean,
Counterparts, love and hate.
Yeah. So at this point, this person is like, I'm going ahead. I don't care at this point what everybody says. I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, the chorus was the same, right? If I were to scroll up and take a look at my first chorus and take a look at my second chorus, Neil repeats the chorus. Because at that point, he's painting that image. There's really no reason to offer up anything too different. The song just had a build. Actually, in the second verse with Leifson's main arpeggio, he did bring in a little bit of a riff that kind of has a burble to it. So that actually built it up a little bit there back into the power chords of the chorus. And then the solo, which obviously we're all prepared to talk about that solo. That solo to me, when I first heard it, had once again, I'm going to say it again, a level of excitement. I would not call that or any part of the song boring, just because I've been playing guitar for a long time and listening to it. I loved the fact that when I first heard it, and then when I, even back in the day, got the tablature book, that he began at the high end of the neck, hitting that 24th fret, because Paul Reed Smith guitars, when they were first released, only had 24 frets. So he made it a point to work that high note that was a thing, was available to him. And that was just awesome, which I already said like 2 minutes ago. I don't want to repeat myself. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking about the solo. What do you guys have to say about the solo?
Yeah, the solo is great. It's dry. This whole song is kind of like, I feel like it's really aggressive. Especially the choruses, the way the guitar is, it's driving. It's really, and then the solo just takes that to another level. And it's probably like the shreddiest, if that's a word, solo that he had done in many a year. At that point, I think
it's one of his best solos.
One
of his best solos. Just... And Rick Beato, the producer, he has this really big YouTube channel. He recently did a video on the top 20 weirdest guitar solos. Not weird because weird for weird's sake, but the guitar player doing an atypical solo, like you wouldn't think it was this person, and he picked Cut to the Chase from Alex Lifeson as a weird solo, great solo. But he's like going all over the place, right? With this solo, like you say, he started off way up here, there, and all that. And I
haven't seen that episode. I'll have to look for that.
It's a good episode.
And
I would pick Cinderella Man as a weird solo, but he picked Cut to the Chase.
Yeah.
But it's one of those solo, and there's some influence from Eric Johnson as far as the fluidity of Alex's playing during this time is flawless. I mean, he could do anything. Like he had total control of his rhythm playing, his lead playing is very fluid. But yeah, such great solo.
Yeah, and I don't know how like recording works in terms of when you do a guitar solo and if the drums are already done. But there's a point in that solo where Neil and Alex are exactly in sync. That part, if you can translate that.
Yeah.
But like it's exactly in sync. The way Neil's syncopation on the snare drum mirrors what Alex is doing just beautifully. It's amazing. And I don't know if they do that together or if Neil,
I think it's during the next set of lyrics.
There's a lot of ways that people would record. I mean, primarily you want the drums down first. So what they would always talk about is getting the bed tracks. So you want a band to record as a group to have that live feel. So 3 guys recording in the room, Neil would be in a live room, amplifiers or speakers would be in a different room. Geddy and Alex could feasibly be standing by Neil. They could feasibly be in the control room. Overdubs have usually been in the control room for Alex Lifeson, usually. And at that point, his solo, I know he did mention that it was a first take solo. It wasn't like, oh, this is a good, like Limelight, they built it. They said, oh, this is a good option. Well, what if you play this here? So it was constructed.
Yeah, so he'd have everything. He'd be listening.
Yeah,
he would have the drums and everything. Yeah, okay. So he probably then did it.
He knew what Neil was going to do. So he was locking in with Neil's drum parts at that point, which he should be doing, basically.
Right.
So yeah, and that's the thing. I know that he mentioned that, it's first, kind of a first take off the cuff. This is great. And obviously they were in top form. So why wouldn't it just be, hey, you know the song, this is the band, you guys are doing your thing. Let's go in and just record this solo. And a lot of times the first thing is the magical thing, because, one individual who had been on some of these had mentioned, kind of put it out there about how, Alex Lifeson, how did you come up with a solo on an Instagram page? And it's basically how someone like him would come up with a solo is basically just you play and play and play, but you really need to listen to what you're hearing. And that's something, obviously, those three guys had a literal, 40-year career of listening to each other and basically being one musician created from three different instruments and three different people. And that's what produces, that solo on the first try. That's what produces these albums.
Yeah.
The fact that he's so ambitious with it and is shredding the guitar and it is kind of off the cuff, it matches not only the lyrics, but kind of like just Counterparts as a whole with being off the cuff, because they just came off of the synth era and we're kind of trying to sort of evolve from that, which, the synth era is still has influences in the rest of their music. It's not like they just dropped it, because they always evolved over time and built up to what ended up being Clockwork Angels, their very last albums.
Speaking of keyboards, we didn't mention there's like organ or something at the end of the
I feel like I heard
end of the second
part.
verse. At the end there's piano, but then that can't stop moving.
Knock those keyboards in.
Keyboards make their appearance.
See, Alex didn't hear that till after the mastering. What's that doing there, Geddy? Geddy's like,
you stuck that in there.
I made that up. That's good fiction, though.
And also, I love that Omar brought up the fact that, on the previous tour, they got to watch Eric Johnson every night. And so that could definitely inspire some little left-hand legato in the solo, because Eric Johnson is definitely a powerhouse for all of that. He's a powerhouse across the board, but definitely has a power, monster legato.
Yeah.
Me again repeating myself. So so that solo goes out of goes just right into a bridge. Nice little riff. Chord key change is kind of the same ish. What are we saying in the bridge part? Young enough not to care too much about the way things used to be. I'm young enough to remember the future. The past has no claim on me. I'm old enough not to care too much about what you think of me, but I'm young enough to remember the future and the way things ought to be. That's just phenomenal.
Yeah. Those are Counterparts right there. I mean, that's,
These are my favorite lyrics, which might be controversial because the other parts of the song are so good. But this is very personal to me because now that I'm in my older 20s, I can definitely say I've always been a people pleaser, but I've sort of had to learn to let go a little bit. Also, I have my own things in my past that have affected me. And I've also had to just sort of like learn to let go. And I've always had a fear of the future with always being in college, not really having like knowing when I'm going to be finished and graduate and start my career. I've always had this like, fear of the future. And that's also something I've really had to conquer, that I'm getting better at. So these lyrics really just hit me right there in the heart. Because, also at this point they're in their 40s. So they're still on the young side. 40s is still young. They still 40, have a lot of your life left. But but they're not, 20 years old. So they've had kids, they've had their career for a while. So they have that life experience.
And they've kind of always run their own career that way of doing their own thing. But, as Neil talks about when they changed their sound and got out of prog and more into other things, that we were young enough to be influenced by the music that was around us. We didn't, we didn't shoo it or anything like that. And that's kind of that same thing of being, wise enough to know how to do something, but young enough to be able to,
they were finding their way. They found their way. And now we've kind of ended up here. And then, of course, obviously they didn't know the years later that, what happened when Neil lost his daughter and everything, and he had to find himself again. So it all cycles.
And the way the words harken to other songs and other ideas. And I didn't realize it till like literally right now. Like you were talking, Kira, on that you're talking about these words. And yeah, I actually really like this part of the song a lot. And where he says about he's young enough that the past has no claim on him. And then he says later he's old enough, he's young enough to remember the future and the way things ought to be. So like he's like young enough that the past doesn't affect him that much, but old enough that he can see the future. Like maybe he's seeing what he's been trying to do all this time. It's kind of coming into fruition. Like, and he's had obstacles along the way and he was still able to do it. And, talking about time, the future and the past reminds me of the garden when he says the future disappears into memory, the moment in between. It's like just beautiful words, right? So when he talks about time and the future and the past, he has a really eloquent way of penning that in a way you've not thought about, but it just makes so much sense.
Yeah, and he was somebody who didn't like to look back on the past too much. He didn't want to, he didn't like to listen to old music. He always wanted to go forward.
And there was another thing I wanted to mention too. Sorry, Kira, were you going to say something?
This is reminding me of Turn the Page, and I know these lyrics are different in each reiteration of the course. We disengage, we turn the page, racing down the river from the past. Those are some of my favorite lyrics of all time.
Time related.
This is kind of the same statement, just a bit of a derivative.
Yep, and I was going to say too. Sorry, Kira. I was going to say too about this time about the music. I alluded at the beginning that Led Zeppelin / John Bonham's rearing their head in this song. This is the part during these lyrics, especially the drumming. The drumming in this part is reminiscent to Good Times, Bad Times from Led Zeppelin, where Neil's going to do da da do do da da. That's Good Times, Bad Times. So this drumming part is Neil bringing out his John Bonham. It's like, oh, I can put this here, and it just when I heard this the first time, I was like, oh my goodness, that sounds like John Bonham, because that's from Good Times, Bad Times. It's the same drumming pattern that he used there. So I thought it was pretty, and plus the drums sound really big on this album. So it's perfect that, when he really is sounding like him is when his drums really sound like big in the production of this record. And by the way, this is my favorite sounding Rush album of all because of, I think, the disaster of Roll the Bones as far as sound goes, not the songs. The songs are good, but the sound. But this album redeemed, and actually every album after this one had to hold up to this one somehow, because this they couldn't go backwards from how good this one sounded. It had to sound somewhat like this one. But in this part of the song, I can hear John Bonham play this part.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily think John Bonham when I first heard this, but it took me back to 1975, and it was this real it was very
this part, all
wow.
of it,
Which then you got me thinking of some of the production for some of the John Bonham parts where they were recording in a mansion and Jimmy Page had him set up in the stairwell and was suspending microphones just to get that explosive bonzo sound.
Right.
Just had to wonder if that factored in with Neil and the Caveman at all, just to say, what can we get for an explosive sound?
Yeah, this was explosive.
Excellent sounding album.
Yep.
So obviously the chorus out is really the same. There's a little bit of that cut to the chase, a little bit of a vocal inflection leading us into, and obviously more of an effect leading us into the outro chorus. So
great effect.
Basically just driving home the idea that you may be right, it may be a waste of time, but I'm going to be doing this. Whether you're
The Donna
becoming
Halper rule again.
whether you
But
become
he
an
adds-
actor
but he-
or become a drummer.
But he adds a but he adds a line. He adds a line to it though.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Where was
Yes.
that line?
What kind of difference can one person make?
Yes. That's right. Yeah, it's just kind of buried. Yes, right in there.
I'm gonna roll the bones and give it a shot. See, there's my other Rush song reference.
And that's something that when you stop and think, when it comes to what kind of difference can one person make in the negative and the positive? And I'm not really going to get into detail on the obvious negatives that we've seen in the news of many years when one person has something driving them that they can make a terrible difference in the lives of many. But you stop and think that even foreshadowing, as if writers are into doing something like that to the next song, the idea of what positive difference can one person make. But I'm not going to get into the next song because that's something that's for another week. And since there was no live recording, I guess we don't really know what our favorite live is.
Yeah, it could be positive and it could be cynical too. That what difference can one person make? It's like, well, what difference can one person make?
Yeah. How you say it?
I do have a favorite live version.
Oh.
But it's not Rush. There's this band called Crush, Krush. I think it's worth a listen. Looking them up on YouTube. Crush, Cut to the Chase, Rush cover band.
Omar, we were talking earlier that I had heard rumors a long time ago that they had sound checked this song. I don't know if you'd ever heard that either during this tour, but then obviously never.
We must find it as Russian. We must find that recording.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, that I give props to whenever a cover band, because it's really hard to nail Rush. Just is.
Mm-hmm.
There's some nuance about Rush, about those three guys. I don't know what it is, but nobody can play like them. Just nobody. Some people come close, but generally sounding like them. But like there's just some nuances. Just no one can pin it. Crush wrote "Cut to the Chase." I suggest looking them up. They did a really good job with this song. Just cool. In a club. I suggest giving them props. I don't even know if they're together anymore, but.
I have a nice little button on this that's at the end of Neil's forward in the tour book, where it says, "And to our way of thinking, we can continue to move upward. We just have to hold off the rust of laziness, the mold of the marketplace, and the dull patina of cynicism. Pursuing such a complicated and elusive state is easier said than done, of course, but while we're chasing it, sometimes we learn one thing, that it is a chase and we may as well cut to it. That's the secret if there is one."
And this is all, I just want to mention one more thing before we wrap up. This is all before he decided he was going to go to Freddie Gruber.
True.
And even someone of his caliber is like, okay, I need to change my technique. I need to be better. I need to improve, which I also have high respect for.
Yeah, it's something you see a lot of people reach a point, and I've certainly encountered that with various musicians, various students, many people. It's common for all of us to reach a point of satisfaction, say, I like this, I can do this. That looks difficult. I'm good here. But Neil, arguably one of the best, if not the best. Can I be better? Always.
He was never satisfied.
So with that in mind, perhaps we've reached the end of Cut to the Chase. And what did I say that was? Episode 192. Feel free to comment on the at the bottom if I've gotten the episode wrong at the end, but correct at the beginning. That'd be a weird comment to make, but thank you for watching this long. Feel free to make a different comment. Feel free to subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. YouTube, you know how it works. So thank you for joining us for discussing Cut to the Chase, even if we've taken the long way around on a lot of this, some of these lyrics, but hey, that's the point. Oh, wait a second. I was about to click the wrong button here to stop recording, and so made sure I got the right button. Anyway, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time for other episodes and at some point, Nobody's Hero.